Hello, everybody. Today I am joined by the legendary Mike Williams, aka Sage of Quay. And today we're going to be talking about hypnosis. Now, as many of you know, I have this new book out called The Sharder, a comedic journey out of hip hop hypnosis, also available on audiobook, on Audible, and iTunes. Mike here happens to be a trained hypnotist. For what was it, Mike? 14 years you were a hypnotist?
I was in private practice, Alfonso, for 12 years. I retired back in September of 2022.
And this is a fascinating thing because not only is he somebody who has vast experience in the field of hypnotism, he's also a legendary musical truth guy on YouTube as well as Rumble. I've watched hours and hours on your stuff. You specialize in the Beatles and the truth behind sort of their agenda, if you will.
Yes.
So yeah, me and the Beatles, sick of them. You know what I mean? Like I can't stand them anymore. I used to grow up a little bit listening to them. Them and the Rolling Stones, for me, it was like, I understand these jingles are catchy, but then I think to myself, it's like, even when I was younger in the early 2000s, I remember the Rolling Stones being put on such a pedestal on just like the local AM FM radio. It was like the Stones are on tour, and I'm like, this has been multiple decades. We're going on a half century of putting these guys in a situation where them going on tour is the most amazing thing ever.
And they're
So
still
that,
going.
yeah, and it's like a half century, and it's like, are people really that into this, or is this some aspect of social engineering, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's social engineering at its core. And the Beatles' work was important because they were really the leader of the pack,
Mm-hmm.
at the front of the parade with the baton. So once you cover the Beatles, everything else just kind of gets tucked underneath them. So, yeah.
The
But
one,
thank you very much for watching my stuff.
yeah, so for me, I've kind of always been somebody who has, dissected geopolitical power structures for quite a bit, ever since I was young teens, just at an instinctual level, walking through the world and being like, that's not adding up. But that over there, if that's the real situation, that makes complete sense because there's
Right.
some weird stuff going on here, and I'm not getting a good explanation in the education system or on mainstream media. Some of these other explanations are making more sense. So I've been kind of that guy for a while, but for a long time, I held on to sacred cows, specifically hip hop, rap music. And I find that when people dive into sort of the truth seeking, I call it geopolitical deconstruction sort of realm, they figure out these mechanisms of power and such, and understand sort of these methods of statecraft. Oftentimes, the one thing they keep holding on to is the music, right?
Yes.
Whether
Yep.
it's the Beatles, whether it's the Rolling Stones, whether it's 50 Cent, Eminem. Oh no, not my guys. They can't be part of it. They can't be a tool. They're so cool, right?
I get that all the time.
Hmm.
People will say, well, that might be so with the Beatles, but not my band.
Hmm.
They look at their band as organic and unscathed by the deep state social engineering agendas that have been in place forever. So it's just one of those things, Alfonso. People have a very difficult time letting go of things that they grew up with. Many times, their bands were the soundtrack of their lives, and they have a deep emotional connection to the music. So, when you turn around and you say, well, you know what? Maybe it's not all it was cracked up to be. There was something else going on. They don't want to hear it.
Hmm. So for me personally, it was kind of a process because I'm diving into these certain situations. I come across the musical truth genre consisting of guys like you, Mark Devlin, this guy Isaac Weishaupt. I think Jay Dyer and my buddy Owen, they do a good job of breaking down the entertainment power structure and how it's used. But so I started going down a a rabbit hole where I'm doing deep dives on all these rappers who die, and they die all the time. And I think it's a combination of things. I think probably one of the biggest factors is just their lifestyle and the decisions they make. And so a lot of rappers were really dying in the 2017, 2018, 2019 time period, like a lot. So I'm going and I'm diving down all these rabbit holes. And after a while, I just got disgusted. I just got disgusted with a lot of these guys because they're sort of reprobate characters at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
they kind of make this, especially in the rap world, because I'm telling you, it's so outrageous and it's so in your face. A great example I would say is an artist like Drake, okay? He's the big hip hop artist, right? He can't sing. Like he needs like 4 or 5 software programs to sing. And even then it's not really cutting it. But he says in one of his songs with The Game, he says flat out period, I'm working with the Canadian Ministry of Defense. So it's like super 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 like in your face some of this stuff. And then I think about like Kanye and Puff Daddy, right? Their rabbit holes are so disgusting. Like I can't even dabble in it. You know what I mean? Especially the Diddy stuff. I'm looking at just some of the headlines from his trial, and I'm just like, this is
Right.
disgusting. You
Yeah.
know?
So Alfonso, were you a big hip hop rap person? Is that the genre of music that you listen to? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up, wanting to play pro sports or backup plan be a rapper. So I unironically I looked up to like 50 Cent and Eminem because I was around, 9 or 10 years old when gangster rap is really becoming the dominant genre of my entire demographic. And
Right.
yeah, and to put things into context, I was born in 1990, but I noticed when I was in college with the kids who were born in 92 onward, it was strictly rap. It was like nothing else but rap music. And then progressively, it's gotten more ridiculous and disgusting to the point where I coined the term hip hop hypnosis because once you snap out of it, there's no getting out. Like I went from being an enthusiastic fan to being like literally disgusted. Like if I would listen to certain artists, like I'll get a physical reaction like this is gross.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. So, are you familiar with the letter that came out around 2012 from a person who allegedly
Yeah.
was in the business? Okay, and he explained that rap in particular
Hmm.
was morphed into gangster rap, and it was because the record companies, the labels, were silent partners in the private prison system.
Hmm.
And the objective was to create this music that would fill the prisons because the prisons were receiving funding from the federal government. So the more prisoners you had, the more money that prison would receive. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was interested to find out if you were familiar with that letter.
I'm very, very familiar with that letter so much that I read it so many times that I completely satirized it in the book and sort of sensationalized it quite a bit. I also voice acted a sensationalized, inspired chapter that kind of will remind you of that letter quite a bit. Um,
Okay.
so there's the
I'm going to buy
private.
your book, by the way. I'd like to read your book to see what you have to say about it.
You're going to have a lot of fun, man, because the approach I took was sort of different. Because for a long time, I was headed down what's his name? The guy who wrote Laurel Canyon, that book.
Dave McGowan.
Yes, for a long time, I was going down a Dave McGowan style direction, and I was. And then I just got so disgusted after a while, I decided to satirize the entire genre. So instead of, pulling up the documents, I sort of lampoon, which is difficult to do because the rap world has
Yeah.
gotten so outrageous and insane and preposterous, right? It's hard to satirize, but I did it. And so the book is about a group of kids. They grow up as hip hop fans, high school kids. One of them wants to be a rapper. One of them wants to be a hip hop journalist. Two other guys, they kind of figure out their own path. There are these rappers beefing and trying to kill each other. There's record executives and there's two cops trying to figure out the whole thing. So it's all these intertwining plots. And I also do the audiobook where I voice all the characters for 9.5 hours. So but it was that deep dive, that McGowan style deep dive into the filth, where I was just like, I can't even take this stuff seriously. I think it's more effective just to make fun of it in a relatable way.
Well, sometimes when you do satire, eh,
Hmm.
it brings out the truth a lot easier.
Hmm.
Because for a lot of people, it is very difficult to dive into the deep, dark stuff. It makes them uncomfortable, and the first thing they do is they shut down. I ran into that even with my Beatle research because there are a lot of aspects of occultism with Aleister Crowley and all that stuff that got really dark, and people didn't want to hear about it. And and I used to tell my audience, look, this stuff is dark, and
Hmm.
it's for many people, it's going to be uncomfortable. So if it's something that you don't want to listen to, it's not something, that you care to have me take you through, then don't listen to the show at this point. But it's the same thing with all of the music, in my opinion. It's all of that stuff, all of that of occultism and that dark stuff. It's embedded in all of it. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about classic rock, you're talking about punk rock, you're talking about hip hop, rap, grunge, just metal. Go through it all, and you're going to see that aspect of it. There's an occult aspect um, underneath the hood of all of it.
Hmm. And there's a few things I just want to mention real quick. The first is about the Beatles. The one thing I always think about with the Beatles is that social engineering accomplishment that they made in my opinion, is the Beatles are walking down the street and young women start screaming and start losing their cool. And that's a completely unnatural, insane behavior, but it's a behavior that's been learned and it's been compounded over generations and generations to whereas people should never act that way around another human being. But the false idol worship has been so fortified over decades that behaving like that is somewhat has been become acceptable.
Well, the thing we need to understand is that humans, the way the controllers look at the masses is that they are easily controllable, programmable. So in the case of the Beatles in the very beginning, to get Beatlemania started, young ladies were paid to show up at the venues and scream and yell and carry on. And in short order, they no longer had to hand out any payment to do that because human beings, being what they are, when they're in a crowd, they mirror and they emulate the behavior that's all around them. So the social engineers, the social scientists are very, very understanding of how the human mind works, what buttons to push to get an emotional reaction, to get a certain behavior. Um, and it's and in my opinion, they learned a lot from the Beatles. So the Beatles were uh, the first band that was created to engineer at a worldwide level. I'm not saying it's the first band that was social engineered and created. I'm saying that they had the task of social engineering worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then everything just flowed from there. That's why I say that the Beatles were foundational to every genre of music that followed after them. But you're exactly right. The way people were behaving and reacting, that's not normal behavior. That's why they called it Beatle mania. It was a mania. And I think the audience should think about that. Think about the words that they use, because when they put words together to describe something, their words have meaning. There's an underlying meaning defining what's going on. So Beatlemania, it was a mania.
Yeah, so I just thought of a few things. The beetle itself vibrates through the air, right? And symbolically, it rolls up dung. So that's kind of why I called the book The Sharter, because it's like, the whole genre. I mean, I think the last 100 years of media in general, we can just throw it all out for the most part. And I think that I got to say this real quick because it's on my mind, a little bit of a tangent, but hypnosis itself, I think you offered one of the best definitions of hypnosis I've ever heard. And that is that hypnosis is behavior modification through repetition.
Right. That's right. That's
So
exactly
when
what it is.
so when we think about that definition, how insane is it that within rap music and all music really, but even country music when they're repeating, uh, you know, repeating alcoholism at nauseum. You know, every big country song's got a very big beer advertisement, a very big whiskey advertisement, a very pathetic, sad sap advertisement where these guys are just lovesick and drunk. You know, that's the message of country music. And then with rap music, it's gotten way more ridiculous. It goes from everything from illegal drugs to the illicit use of prescription pharmaceuticals. That's a really big one they advertise. People
Yeah.
taking those recreationally. Um, and it gets into the opiates as well because what they do is very clever. They advertise opiates via something called lean, which is prescription strength cough syrup with codeine and promethazine mixed with soda, and it's this purple iced beverage, and they advertise it, you know, big time on all the different rap music videos, and then from there people think that's cool, and then they might get another habit. So it's, you know, the private prison part of hip hop is big, but I also think there's a large sort of international cartel advertisement vehicle within hip hop for sure.
No, absolutely. Music is there to sell. It's it's to sell behavior. It's to sell lifestyle.
Hmm.
It is. It's behavioral modification. That's music is a very, it's one of the biggest tools. The music and the entertainment industry, Hollywood, films,
Hmm.
is one of the biggest tools in the toolbox of the social engineers.
Hmm.
And they know this, and they've known this for a very, very long time. In previous shows, I've talked about the Frankfurt School and people like Theodore Adorno. Then we get into Tavistock and these other uh, deep state entities, and they are very well aware of how music plays a very, very important role in being able to change things. And and this is what they do. And you know, of course, people don't realize it. They don't realize that there's an agenda behind the music. They grab onto it like you did with hip hop and rap. It's like I did with the British invasion and classic rock, and you just enjoy it, but you don't realize that you're playing in their sandbox. It's a, it's the sandbox has been put together, and it's there to influence you very subliminally in so many ways. It's the presentation. It's how they present the band. It's how they dress. It's the album covers. It's the occult symbolism on the album covers. It's the style of music. It's the, you know, theme of the lyrics. Um, a lot of times I'll get asked, Mike, are you saying that every single band that we've listened to over time was in on the agenda, that, you know, they had an understanding of what it is that they were interacting with and what they were participating in? And I said, no, no. You get some ringleaders, you get those bands or artists with the baton at the head of the parade. And then, as I mentioned before, humans are, they naturally mirror. They go with the flow of the crowd. Well, there's this whole emulation piece that takes place with music as well. So other up and coming bands are taking a look at the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kings. I'll go back to my era, back to Led Zeppelin, and they're going to do the same thing. They like that style of music. We're going to put a band together. We're going to write and record that style of music. And that's how it perpetuates itself.
Hmm.
You know, it's the same thing with music producers. So I get asked that question too. Are you saying every music producer is in on the game? And I said, no, no. You have some of the big key music producers like George Martin of the Beatles. You had Quincy Jones, who's passed away, and their work is idolized. And so up and coming record producers, they take a look at their techniques, how they approach things, and then they assimilate that. They bring that in. And so that's how it continues to carry on. Um, it's really not any more difficult than that. Humans mirror and emulate, and then they idolize. Many of these bands and these artists, like even in the hip hop world, I'm sure you're going to tell me, they become they become gods in the minds of the fan base.
Hmm. Yeah, that's totally true, man. I have so much to say, but I have to ask you a question real quick. And this is for my audience to know because this is so interesting. Who was Theodore Adorno?
Adorno was with the Frankfurt School. He was The Frankfurt School was comprised of predominantly Jewish intellectuals,
Hmm.
the Jewish intelligentsia, and they were Marxists. And they uh, their whole lot in life was to implement cultural Marxism, and and it's differentiated from the Marxism, let's say Lenin Marxism, going back, if we go back to the Russian Revolution, to the Bolshevik Revolution, where the implementation of the Bolshevik regime was done through violence. It was killing, war, murder, so on. And during that period of time, the communists thought for sure that once they had overthrown the Russian Tsar and they had gotten their hands on Russia, it now belonged to them, that uh, that was going to roll into a worldwide Marxist revolution, and it didn't happen.
Hmm.
So they were kind of scratching their heads, what's going on here? We expected that this was going to be a catalyst to implementing Marxism internationally across the world. And so the Frankfurt School came along. They came into being around in the 1920s, early 1920s. Interestingly enough, at the same time as the Tavistock Institute, when it was the Tavistock Clinic. Tavistock before the 1920s was they spawned from Wellington House, and Wellington House was the propaganda arm of the British military and intelligence during World War One. But so the Frankfurt School stepped forth, and they had said that, look, you're going about this the wrong way. If you're going to beat people over the head with a hammer, you're not going to accomplish much. In fact, you're just going to get people turned off. They're going to walk away, and we're never going to be able to implement our Marxist agenda that way. So what the Frankfurt School did was they said, look, we need to do this very strategically, and we need to do this by um, by doing it from within the system,
Hmm.
infiltrating the systems, infiltrating the governments, infiltrating the military, the media, all different types of institutions, and we subvert from within. And we do this in a very, very methodical way. And because it's so methodical, people are not going to pick up on it. So it's incremental change over time. And as incremental change is being made, people start to accept it. They bring it into their lives, and now it becomes part of their life. It becomes the norm. So that was the approach of the Frankfurt School. And what Theodore Adorno was most well known for was critical theory. So the best way to summarize critical theory is Adorno would look at Western culture and he would say, "This is what's wrong with it. That's what's wrong with it." He would be critical of it, and he would then say, "It would be better if you thought this way. It would be better if we did things that way." As an example, the example I use a lot on shows is the Frankfurt School's philosophy was behind the whole breakdown of the family nucleus.
Hmm.
So they knew that they could not implement their Marxist agenda if the family was intact and the old family traditional values were in place, which included institutionalized religion. And in the United States, the predominant religion is Christianity, whether it be Catholicism, Christianity, uh, just I'm using it as an umbrella
Hmm.
term. And so what the Frankfurt School did was they started to infiltrate the media, and that included, not only television, but it was magazines and newspapers and so on. And they started the feminist movement. They started to hit women with, "Do you really like being home and taking care of your children? Do you really want to do that? Do you want to be at home? Don't you want to do what your husband's doing?" So now there were many women that were very satisfied with the traditional role of a woman in a household, the wife, the mom. to look after the children, take care of the home. The father went out, he worked, he kept the roof over everybody's head. And for some people, this is going to sound, oh, it's so old fashioned. Well, that's because the Frankfurt School and Tavistock were very successful at getting people to change their mindsets and to change how they viewed society. And so slowly what happened was um, they started hammering, driving the point home through the media that women should not be at home. Like, in other words, I remember, going back about 30, 40 years ago, where they were flat out essentially ridiculing women, moms that stayed home to watch kids. Oh, you're a housewife? They would make comments like that. Don't you want to be a professional? Don't you want to work in the corporate world? So anyway, ultimately what happened is they were able to turn the tide, and they got women thinking more about going to work. In fact, there's a magazine out there. I think it's probably still out there, but back in the day, it was called Parent Magazine, and it only showed a woman.
Mm.
I don't, to the best of my knowledge, very rarely, if ever, did they show a husband and wife. So the subliminal message there is parent, mom.
Mhm.
Mom goes to work. Mom gets out of the house. So these are the types of tactics that they were using. Now, in order to really get things pushed along, what they also did, because there's a lot of levers that they have, they don't just have one lever that they pull. They had to make it more difficult to live on one income. So many years ago, your dad went to work, mom stayed at home, watched the kids, took care of the house. And so you were able to live on a one income household. And growing up when I was a kid, I was born in 59, so going through the 1960s, um, my mom didn't work, dad worked, and we had a pretty good life. I mean, we were middle class, but I didn't think I missed anything in life,
Mhm.
and all of our neighbors had the same deal. Well, then what they had to do was they had to make things more financially difficult. They had to present financial challenges and difficulties. In other words, the prices of homing increase, of a home increase, buying a house, the prices of this and that. So before you know it, what's happened is the overhead, which used to be down here
Mhm.
for a single income house, is now up here. And now a single income house can't support an overhead that's here now.
Mhm.
So that forced the women in society to go off and go to work. So that was another lever that they had to get them out of the house. So, and people really shouldn't think of this as an argument about whether a woman should work or not. That's completely up to the individual.
Mhm.
What I'm explaining is an agenda. It was a plan to break up the nucleus of the family, and that's how they did it. And they do it in a very subliminal way. It's
Mhm.
very methodical so that it's not obvious as to what they're doing. And so when both parents go to work during the day, what happens to the children? The children have to be cared for. So they might have to go to like a daycare before they go to school. When they're in school, they're there with their teachers. And then there's many times there's like an after school program because the parents aren't home yet. So then we had a situation where, I mean, this situation still exists today, where the kids really don't have a lot of interaction with their parents at night. Maybe when the parents get home, if they're not still doing work from their jobs,
Mhm.
and on the weekends. But on the weekends, what happens is the parents have a lot of catch up to do because Monday through Friday, they were at work doing their jobs. So everything starts to get balled up, and the separation process has taken place. And now the kids are not being influenced primarily by their parents. They have all of these outside influencers that God knows what it is they're filling their heads with,
Mhm.
whether it be in daycare, during school, and so on. And the parents' role as a in guiding their children's development and in guiding their education and their understanding of life has been marginalized. So those are the types of things that the Frankfurt School had concocted. Um,
And
they,
then
their ideology is behind the whole woke
mhm, right.
agenda, right? So even though the Frankfurt School is no longer in existence as far as an entity,
Mhm,
um, their ideology and their uh, acolytes are everywhere,
mhm.
are everywhere. So, and Tavistock certainly is still with us. So,
But with
that's, I mean, just yeah,
that's so Theodore Adorno, he's one of these social engineer Frankfurt School guys,
yes,
but he
yes.
specifically is credited for writing most of the Beatles songs, is if I remember that correctly.
Yeah, no, no. Well, let me just explain that. All
Okay.
right. So Adorno was a philosopher. He was a
Yeah.
composer. Okay. But he was a Marxist.
Yeah.
There, there is, there is information out on the internet
Hmm.
that claims that Adorno wrote all of the Beatles' music. Now, when I did my big presentation back in April of 2020, it's titled "Did the Beatles Write All Their Own Music?"
Hmm.
We dug into that. I wasn't just me doing that presentation. I mean, I was the guy at the front of the parade, but I had other folks that were part of the team looking into
Hmm.
different aspects. We looked into Adorno. Well, we couldn't find anything that pinpointed uh, specifically that Adorno was writing all of the Beatles' music.
Hmm.
And in fact, in my presentation, because one of our team members was able to go into, they had access uh, to take a look into the publishing system. So that would show who is credited with the music, right? So, I mean, we could say that, okay, that's easy to get around because they can just, credit the writing of the song or the publishing of the song to the artist or whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is we looked and looked and looked,
Hmm.
and we couldn't find anything that said that Adorno wrote all of their music. Now, what I did say was that um, Adorno, being part of the Frankfurt School and connected at the hip with Tavistock, because when we talk about Frankfurt, we talk about Tavistock, we talk about the Club of Rome, when we talk about Stanford Research, when we talk about all of these international entities, they're all interconnected. So it's a horizontal. People like to look at it as verticals. It's not. Yeah, there are verticals. There's Tavistock, there's the Club of Rome, and then we have organizations like Bilderberg, and we have Davos with the World Economic Forum. We have the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, but they're all working together. There's an international structure, control system that is above the what people believe is the governing structure that most people believe in: presidents, prime ministers, and all that stuff. I mean, that's puppet show stuff. So I I have I have speculated that Theodore Adorno was a major player with the Beatles' psychological operation, and he worked very closely with George Martin, and they were in uh, they were an oversight capacity. Think of them as stakeholders in the Beatles operation. Now, that doesn't mean that Theodore Adorno didn't write some of the Beatles music. I think he did write some of the Beatles music along with George Martin. I believe George Martin wrote some of the Beatles music. In fact, there's a song on the White Album. It's titled Piggies.
Hmm.
And if Beatle fans go back and listen to Piggies, and I'll tell you is Piggies is textbook Adorno, both the music and lyrically. So I do believe Adorno played a big part with the Beatles, but it was more in an executive managerial capacity, where George Martin was the managing director of the operation, and then um, what when I say we, I was working with another person on this particular aspect of the presentation back in well, before I released it in April of 2020. We believe that there were two um, different uh, songwriting groups, very small groups, maybe 3 to 4 in Group A, and 3 to 4 in Group B. So Group A would be songs that were going to be called John Lennon songs. And Group B would be songs that would be referred to or credited to Paul McCartney or Paul McCartney songs.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the people on the team is an extraordinary musician, and he's been in the music business for a very long time. And he sat down and he was communicating with me, and he says, Mike, I hear stylistically two different styles taking place here.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, this says to me that we have the possibility that there are two different songwriting teams. It's not John Lennon and Paul McCartney, at
Mm-hmm.
least through 1966. And this is how they were doing it. So think of it as, we have Adorno basically in a stakeholder oversight capacity. Below Adorno, if we're looking at an organization chart, there's George Martin, who's the managing director of the operation. Below George Martin, there are teams of songwriters, ghostwriters. Now, some people say, well, why would these people write these songs and not be credited? Aren't they missing out on a lot of money? I don't think for one second that the people who were participating in the Beatles operation were not very, very well compensated.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was walking out the door broke.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you have to keep in mind that it was a deep state operation. It's very difficult for many people, especially Beatle fans, to get their arms wrapped around this, but that's what the Beatles were. So it's went a long way here to try to explain it, but Adorno did not write all their own music, if you ask me, because he was
Mm-hmm.
involved with a lot of other stuff as far as strategizing with the Frankfurt School, as well as he wrote many books.
Mm-hmm.
He was back in the day. He was also on television. He was doing interviews and so on. So he was a busy guy, and so I just don't. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think he was writing all of their music. Some people. I'm glad you brought it up because some people say that I say that, and I have never said that. And if they went back to my big presentation, they would know I never said that. And I have a very different take on Adorno's role.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mike, I got another question for you.
Yeah,
If you could briefly describe probably one of the gnarliest musical conspiracy theories that may not be a conspiracy theory, it's more likely to have occurred, and that is that Paul McCartney, the original Paul McCartney, likely passed away in what was it, 1968 in a car crash?
66.
Okay.
Yeah, so the prevailing theory is that it's a car crash, but
Mhm.
that's just speculation. Nobody knows how he passed away. Some people will say that maybe he didn't pass away, that he was just simply replaced and then sent off someplace to live out the rest of his life. So what I explain is the original Paul McCartney was replaced.
Mhm.
Now, whether people want to, I personally believe that Paul McCartney passed away.
Okay.
That's my personal belief. But I don't get into a rock throwing contest with people. If people want to think that he didn't pass away and then there was Paul McCartney lived on after 1966, after he was replaced, the real Paul McCartney, then okay, that's what you want to believe. But the more important thing is not whether he died or not. It was that he was indeed replaced. He was replaced. So the guy that's been playing Paul McCartney since 1966, I refer to him as Billy Shears. He has the primary contract to play the part. He's not Paul McCartney.
Mhm.
He's not.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's
Okay.
always a fun one because in the hip hop world, sometimes I speculate that Eminem at some point was replaced
Yeah.
because, I mean, his early albums from the early 2000s, he was funny, he was rhythmic, he had charisma, he had courage. And then when his career really apexed around 2008 with the release of 8 Mile, a film in which he starred in, basically playing himself, he went through a time period where his best friend Proof died, and that's a really weird situation because if you watch the music video for like Toy Soldiers, it's called, his best friend Proof dies in the video, and then oh wow, it happens. Could it be a form of predictive programming? Could it be a form of art imitating life? I'm not really sure. But after that, Eminem wasn't really on the map for quite a long time period. He is alleged to have almost overdosed a few times, apparently, at least one time. That's like big, right? But then he comes back and he's this guy who's constantly yelling. Like he's always yelling in his rap. It's not this rhythmic, funny, charismatic guy from the early 2000s. I do speculate that if anybody was replaced in a Paul McCartney type situation, I do believe personally that Eminem is most likely to have been that guy because, like the Beatles, he played a very important role in bringing hip hop to the white American audience, right?
Exactly.
You
Yep.
know, he was the thing because you mentioned these musicians being treated like God. I remember specifically one of my neighbors saying Eminem is my God. And with men of my demographic growing up during that time period, he was like it. He was the coolest guy. He was the pinnacle of the early 2000s, late 90s culture of South Park, Sports Center, WWF wrestling, Total Request Live, and Eminem. He was
Right.
it. And from there, his albums are comedic, but they do sort of introduce a lot of really absurd behaviors. He kind of expanded on the work of like Tupac Shakur. Tupac really sort of normalized everyday marijuana use. Snoop Dogg came in with the left hook to further compound this glorification of marijuana use. And then Eminem comes in, he's doing that, he's drinking, he's doing hard drugs. You know, the first rapper to really talk about hard drug use explicitly. So he you know, he accomplished quite a bit for his social engineers, you know, and I do
Yeah.
think that he was such an important piece that I don't think they could have afforded to not replace him.
Yeah. Well, look, they do get replaced. And one of the things that the replacement of Paul McCartney showed, and I'm sure that Tavistock after work went out for drinks and they had a good old time. They realized that they were able to swap out one of the most famous, if not the most famous musician in the world, and very few people noticed.
Hmm.
So with Eminem, it could very well be too. Like I'm not familiar. Oh, I know who Eminem is, but I don't. I haven't analyzed them like I did with the Beatles because I grew up with the Beatles. But look, doubles and lookalikes is something that's used. They're used all the time. They're used in politics all the time. I
Hmm.
mean, Stalin had like 4 or 5 doubles and lookalikes.
Hmm.
Um, so we can go back to Biden, and at least in my mind, it's clear that there was more than one Joe Biden. One of them was like 6'2".
Hmm.
you know? So it's not something that's odd. That's what I want to say. Doubles and lookalikes, and like you say, Alfonso, if you have a particular artist, somebody who's a big time influencer, you're going to want to keep that in place
Hmm.
because their effectiveness, their ability to sway people to think a certain way, to behave a certain way, if they're very successful at that, then they're going to keep that alive one way or another.
Hmm. So the music industry, right? This is how I think of it. I think of music as the most powerful magic in the realm, and it sort of makes sense to me that at the top of the geopolitical power structure, music would be an important role. I mean, important part of that. You know, just important in the sense that we are uh, like 70% water, and I always visualize a stereo and a glass of water next to that stereo. When that stereo blares its vibration, that glass of water is vibrating like that stereo. So music itself, I think, has always been the most powerful magic because unlike film, it can travel through neighborhoods, it can, you know, go through walls, whatever the case may be. I
It's
always want to
frequency,
ask
yeah.
people, what do you think are the positive aspects of music? I see some guitars, I think a piano, a keyboard in your background. I think music has so much awesome potential. Some say it has the power to heal. I listen to the birds all the time, the literal birds. They're music to me, nature's music. And honestly, from just a pragmatic standpoint, when I hear a pop song, a catchy song, I'm okay with it. I know it's social engineering, but I sort of I can enjoy musical talent, especially vocals, as I'm going about my day, not listening to it too much on repeat over and over again, but sort of acknowledging, okay, music obviously is used for social engineering in a major way. Most people don't know that, but you know, at the same time, it's difficult to say it's all evil. So, what do you think are the positive aspects of music and the potential of music?
Music is very important to
Hmm.
humans, and um, in no way do I want to be interpreted as saying that we shouldn't listen to music or music is not a good thing. I'm a musician, and my when I write my music is there to get a message out to my audience about, you know, a lot of my music has to do with social commentary. Not all of it, but some of it does, to try to
Hmm.
get people to think a little bit about what's going on in the world and how we can make it a better place.
Hmm.
So music is very, very important. Um, but the controllers know this. They know how powerful music is. So what they did was they decided, well, we're going to use it as a way to social engineer it. We're going to use it as a way to get people to follow a certain path, to steer them. And that's why there's all these different genres, because they know that one genre is not going to it's not one size fits all. So you have British Invasion, which ultimately became classic rock. You have the punk scene, you have hard rock, you have metal, you have grunge, you got hip hop and rap, you've got techno. All of this stuff is done in order to affect a certain segment of the population that they know that they have to get their hooks into. But unfortunately, they've taken something so beautiful as music, and they're using it for reasons, for purposes that is really anti-humanity agenda. And because people don't know any better, because they know how, see, human beings resonate with music. Like when you talk about the beats per minute, and in music, we talk about BPM, beats per minute. So anything between, 80 beats per minute to 120 beats per minute, that's that is in sync with many people's heart rate, you see.
Mm.
So that's why we have an affinity for the music, because when we start getting into the beat, it starts to, the human body and the human mind connects to it. And but like I said, they know all of this stuff, and they just decided that they were going to use it for reasons, for selfish reasons, for reasons, for their own agenda. But so my recommendation, I don't know if I'm even answering your question, Alfonso, but my recommendation to folks is, if you're a musician and a songwriter, write songs that resonate with humanity. Write upbeat, positive songs that help people to put them in a better frame of mind and make them feel good.
Hmm.
That's what we need to do. And quite frankly, there are a lot of songs that are out there in the mainstream music industry, the different genres of music. They're very good songs.
Yep.
I've always said, people will say to me, well, what do you think about the Beatles songs now? Like, well, the Beatles songs are still great songs, but they were songs with an agenda.
Hmm.
But there were other songs that, I don't know. I listened to Johnny Nash's I Can See Clearly Now.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know that song. I can see clearly now.
Yeah, I
The
know that
rain
one.
is
Yeah.
gone. Yeah, I love that song. Every time it comes on, I'm like, yeah, I love that song. And I will sit there,
Yeah.
and I will just sit there and listen to it. It's just something that really makes me feel good.
Hmm.
So I guess the message is, be discerning. Be
Hmm.
discerning. No, when you're listening to music, understand that where it's coming from, and it's coming from a machine. It's when I say a machine, I'm talking about the deep state. And enjoy what you can, but don't try not to get yourself so invested and so connected in it that you wind up being in a cult.
Hmm.
Because that's what happens to a lot of people. See, Tavistock's great at two things. I mean, there are a lot of things, but two things that they really excel at is reducing adult thinking down to that of a child. So everything, the responses and behavior is emotions based.
Hmm.
That's why so many times you'll see these people will comment in YouTube or wherever, Facebook or Twitter, and you see these obnoxious um, comments. It's because they're not coming at it from a critically thinking adult perspective. They're coming at it from a childlike perspective.
Mhm.
It's like you're taking something away from me, or you're telling me something I don't like, and I don't like that. And you're clashing with what it is I want to believe. And so they get angry and they
Mhm.
lash out. So they've taken adult thinking and they've moved it into that category. That's number one. Number two is they're very good at creating cults. So the Beatles are a cult. The Rolling Stones are a cult. Eminem is a cult.
Mhm.
Politics. Trump is a cult. Biden is a cult.
Mhm.
And I'm not taking sides one way or another. I'm just saying they want to bucket people. They want to put them in buckets because by doing that, now we can control you. Because if you're in this bucket and we know you belong in that bucket, we know what buttons to push
Mhm.
to make you react and to
Mhm.
make you behave a certain way. Right. So that's what we have to. It's enjoy the music. If you have music you really like, enjoy it, but don't immerse yourself in it. That's all I can say. I mean, I can still put the Beatles. I have my Beatle records. I can still put the records on once in a while. In fact, last week I listened to the White Album. I can still listen to it. I can enjoy many of the songs, but it does not have that same grip on me, Alfonso, that it used to have.
Mhm.
I used to worship the Beatles. They were gods to me,
Mhm.
and but it's not like that anymore. The luster is gone, so I can enjoy the music for the sake of enjoying it and then move on.
That's awesome. And I think what you're doing is so important because, people being effectively in a cult for 50 years is sort of concerning, right? And then for me, I felt a similar call to action because I remember a distinct experience where I'm at work and I'm working with this guy in his 50s, 60s, huge Rolling Stones fan, and we're listening to music and he's just belting out every lyric word for word. And I'm like, oh, wow, I actually know all the lyrics too. And I thought about all the lyrics of all the songs, all the rap songs, all the absurdities. And I thought to myself, if this generation was listening to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones for a half century almost, I can't let that, or I want to do something to prevent my generation from listening to Drake and Lil Wayne for 50 years. Because the
Right,
effects of that, I think, are going to be far more dastardly than the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. It's the same agenda, but it's such explicit trash for the most part. Aside from a few songs, whatever, a few, they got
right.
little quirky little talents here and there, but I mean, both guys can be pretty funny. But what I'm saying is, if my generation and the generation behind me, Gen Z, grows up worshiping these false idols for a century, it's going to be outrageous. So I want to do something. I wanted to do something to prevent that, and I think the best way I could do that was through a comedy crime classic where these relatable characters are going through this situation where they do worship these guys. They don't know they're
Yeah,
worshiping them, but they're worshiping them, and that has effects for their personal lives. And the agenda is not theirs; it's somebody else's agenda. And when their ears are open up to that vibration, they are susceptible, no matter who you are, to a form of hypnosis that can get you into a form of cult worship. It's so over the top. It could only be true. So,
yeah, yeah. It is. I put a post up on my community tab on my Paul is Dead page, going back about a week ago,
mhm.
and Yoko Ono had a daughter who she was estranged from, Kyoko, and she was there was an article written, an interview, and she had said that as a kid she was in a cult,
Wow.
and then when she reunited with her mother Yoko and with
Mhm.
John Lennon, I'm paraphrasing here, she said the Beatles were a cult too. So this is a person who was in a cult who later on, connects with her mother and John, and then assesses the situation with the Beatles and the
Mhm.
fan base as a cult as well. So, and you're absolutely right, Alfonso, where they worship them. There's this whole worship thing, and what what I try to explain to my audience is, and for people who want to listen, whenever you worship, you're taking a back seat individually as a person. You're putting that person ahead of you. I mean, you're lionizing them, you're worshiping them. There's some kind of God, even though you may not think in those terms. But and you're also prone to being led down certain paths because many of these artists and these entertainers, they have influence. They're very, very influential, and people listen to what they say, and then they assimilate it. They bring it in, and now it's like, well, that's what I believe too. Eminem said this, or John Lennon said that, or Keith Richards said this, and so it, this is, oh, that resonates with me. Does it really resonate with you, or is it
Mhm.
because you're in that cult, and as part of the process of being in a cult and following that, you just take it in and you don't question it. So that's what people have to be aware of. What I said this outside. I did a conference presentation go back about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was interviewed outside the conference, and I had said that if you're going to worship somebody, worship yourself. And what I meant by that is invest in yourself, focus on yourself.
Mhm.
What do you want to be? What are your objectives? What are your goals? Are you going to continue to go follow some band or some artist or some entertainer or some celebrity or some politician? Is that your whole lot in life?
Mhm.
Um, don't do that. Try to take that energy and that focus and bring it back into you. And by doing that, you're also going to bring it into your family. You're going to bring it into your husband or your wife and your children. I mean, that's just how it's going to work. But people are constantly disempowering themselves because they give their power out to somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me, especially with something like the not even the iPhone, but I'm talking the iPod. The iPod, in my estimation, really introduced hip hop hypnosis, or just this insatiable desire to listen to music all the time. Like having
Right.
your headphones in for 4 hours a day became
Yeah.
normalized with the iPod way prior to even the iPhone, right? So people had their libraries, they had multi-thousand song libraries in the palm of their hand. And so like their media diet from that time period, we're talking like, what is it, 2004 or something like that. I feel like their media diet and their appetite skyrocketed. And one thing that I found ever since that my sort of diet of music has been greatly reduced, I actually enjoy it a lot more since I don't have this insatiable need to have my library in the palm of my hand. When I'm going to the bank, when I'm at the gym, wherever, some catchy pop song, it's wow, like wow, that's incredible, you know?
Right. Right.
And
Yep.
what would you say about that? Just the amount of music that people listen to on repeat, is that textbook hypnosis?
Yeah. I mean, you're constantly being subjected to hypnosis. You are,
Hmm.
because you've got the music, you've got the beat, you've got the lyrics, and let's face it, when people have those headphones, those earbuds in, they zone out. So they go into a trance state. And I see people, in fact, it's funny you should bring this up, Alfonso. I was at the gym today and I was on the treadmill. It's on the second floor, and I'm looking down. And the guy that's doing the cleaning in the gym, he's got headphones on.
Yeah.
And the whole time that he was cleaning the gym, I could tell it was music too, because every once in a while he would move to the music.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, so he's doing exactly what you described. And so, yeah, if see, nothing in excess is ever any good. So if you're going to overindulge in music and listen to it perpetually all the time, like you said, for hours, that's not a good thing. Because in most cases, there's a total lack of discernment as to what it is you're really listening to, lyrically and so on. And you probably know this, but a lot of these songs, like we go back to like Led Zeppelin and even the Beatles, you've got backmasking
Hmm.
in the songs where, and backmasking is subliminal. And the social engineers, they believe that backmasking, even though it's backwards, is is making it into your mind, into your subconscious. So to answer your question, enjoy your music, but like in anything, if it's in excess or you're overindulging in it, and many times even a lot of these kids, they listen to it so much and so perpetually that they're not getting other stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting schoolwork done. Um, uh, they're not performing at work because they're constantly engaged with the music. And so it's funny. Peter Tompkins, Pete has the YouTube channel PT Pop. He and I talked about this going back a few months ago. He said, Mike, have you ever noticed every time we go someplace, there's music always playing. You go to the
Yeah.
gas pump, music's playing. You go to the store, music's playing. You're in an elevator, music's playing. He says, what's up with that? I said, well, they constantly have to keep you engaged.
Mm-hmm.
They're constantly trying to keep you connected in.
One place where I see it a lot is actually on the road. And I'll see young folks that are so engaged with what they're listening to, they're acting out the lyrics as they drive, or,
Yeah,
and I kind of compare it to like a mobile mental asylum, just like bumping, just
yeah,
whatever it might be. But it's like you're kind of in this aquarium of hypnosis, and it's all voluntary. And the thing that I personally see with a lot of my followers and people who follow me is that they are snapping out of hip hop hypnosis, because once you snap out of it, there's really no going back, because it's reached a point where it's built on the work of the Beatles, it's built on the work of the Rolling Stones, it's built on the work of hair metal, it's built on the work of punk rock. And then
right.
the final stage is rap music, where it's like this ludicrous like drug advertisement for the most part, this ludicrous like antisocial behavior programming that's like broadcasted as cool, but it's like it's gotten so disgusting and absurd that I do think that the time is right for millions and millions and millions of people to snap out of hip hop hypnosis. I do think that we're seeing that on a mass scale, because I think what we see with Diddy, Puff Daddy, he was, man, I'll tell you what, the first CD I ever got was Puff Daddy and the Family. He's been sort of he's been the quarterback of hip hop culture for like the last 25 years.
Yeah,
And to see him in these headlines that are repulsive, and then you see, Kanye, who's got sort of, he represents to me the last gasps of hip hop hypnosis, because he's grabbing as much attention as is humanly possible, and nobody
yeah,
else can compete with that level of attention grabbing. So, but that to me, to those both of those guys in their sort of separate, totally different plights, represent sort of the last gasp of hip hop hypnosis, because I mean, it's been a long time with rap. It's been since like the early 90s heavily, and we're going on, 30 years. So I prefer to believe that we're at the end of it, but there's another part of me that believes it could go for a century. Like it could be rock and roll on steroids, and we're just beginning with the hip hop hypnosis. So I have provided something for people to laugh your way out of it. I like to say, just look back and laugh.
right.
And Mike, I think you're going to really enjoy the book. I think you're going to laugh out loud. I really do. A lot of people laugh out loud, especially with the audiobook. Because what I found with the audiobook, and I love audiobooks. I just
Did
listened
you do
to
the audio, Alfonso? Did you do it?
I did all the voices.
Okay, okay, you did the voiceover. Okay,
All the voices for all the different characters. So
okay,
that took like a year of, weekends, early mornings, weekends, more weekends, all the time. So, and people love the audiobook. So, and I love audiobooks myself. I just listened to Norm Macdonald's audiobook. It was,
yeah.
oh my, dude, I was laughing out loud on a plane, just in between two ladies, just laughing out loud. So, but I just love the audiobook medium, because you can go about your business, you can go to the gym, you can go to work, you can go to grocery shopping and listen to
Yeah, you go
something that's fun.
traveling.
So
You're on vacation. You can listen to the audiobook. It's great.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I think that's all I got for today, Mike. It was awesome speaking with you. I think we could talk for days about this subject, because there's so much to it. There's so many stories, so much so much to say. I'm really excited for Mark Devlin, who you spoke with recently. His new book called was it Nobody's Dad's a Plumber, and
right.
about it's funny because a lot of these acts that you think are organic, they actually come from a rather inorganic place, and they have relatives and parents that are quite well connected, and it's not one or two of them, it's like most of
No,
them. So I'm excited for that
right.
as well.
the A-list players are all connected. So
Mhm.
Alfonso, I want to tell you, it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I most certainly will buy your book. In fact, when we're done here, I'll place the order on Amazon. I
Awesome.
read the
And
little write-up.
what's that?
Yeah. I said I read the little write-up that you have on Amazon about the book, so I will buy it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And anybody looking for the book, you can check it out on hiphophypnosis.com. That'll bring you to the Amazon link. You can go to the charterbook.com. And all my links for everything is at alfonsofr.com. So those are my three websites that'll get you as much as you want of me. I'm constantly goofing off on the internet. So and we're having fun. So and seeking truth in the same way, but having fun while doing it.
Yeah. Are you on X, by the way?
I am, yeah.
Okay, I'll find you on X too, and we can connect there as well.
Okay, that sounds awesome. All right, Mike. Pleasure.
Alfonso, bye-bye now. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.